Good morning, and thank you for all being here. Before I begin, I want to recognize and thank our federal partners for their continued partnership and commitment to the safety of our community. We are joined today by U.S. Attorney Dominique Gervais, Special Agent in Charge for ATF Rosenda, Special Agent in Charge for FBI Jason Camaraderie, and U.S. Marshal Mr. Black right there. We're grateful for your presence and more importantly for the work you do alongside us every day. I also want to acknowledge the men and women of the Dayton Police Department as well as our local and regional partners. Thank you for the work that you do, often behind the scenes. That's what makes the efforts like this possible. We're talking about today about an initiative that's focused on downtown Dayton. But I want to be very clear about something. Our partnership with our federal colleagues is not new. This is not something that just started today. For years, we have worked together to identify and investigate and hold accountable individuals who choose to engage in violent crime, particularly those who illegally carry and use firearms. This announcement simply reflects a more focused and visible effort in one of the most important areas of our city. Downtown Dayton is a vital part of our community. It is where people come to work, to gather, and to enjoy. To our community, I want you to know that this work is ongoing, it is collaborative, and is focused not just on enforcement, but on ensuring that Dayton remains a place where people feel safe and supported. To our partners standing with us today, thank you for all of you for your continued commitment, your professionalism, and your willingness to stand shoulder to shoulder with us in this effort. At this time, I would like to turn over to U.S. Attorney's Office.
Good morning. I'm Dominique Gervais, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Ohio. And I'm grateful to Chief Afzal for inviting me to join him here today to tell the public about our ongoing efforts to address violent crime and gun crime in Dayton. It's my job as the U.S. Attorney to keep our communities in the Southern Ohio safe, and doing that requires strong partnerships between our local agencies and our federal partners, and we have those strong partnerships here in Dayton. Along those lines, I also want to thank Marshal Black for being here, Special Agent in Charge Camaraderie, and Special Agent in Charge Rosendo. All of the agencies that are represented up here today have played a significant role in our recent and ongoing efforts to hold violent offenders accountable in Dayton. When I became the U.S. Attorney, I promised the public that my office would aggressively pursue federal firearms offenses and seek stiff sentences for repeat violent offenders who are caught with guns. We're doing just that here in Dayton. In the past several weeks, we've brought federal firearms charges against a number of individuals, defendants, due to the work of the Dayton Police Department and our federal partners represented up here today. Following the press conference, we're going to release a written press release that's going to have more details about some of these cases, but I do want to highlight a few of them today. But before I do that, I want to stress that some of the defendants that I'm about to discuss are charged by indictment or complaint. An indictment or a complaint contains allegations only, and the defendants who are charged in those charging instruments are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Just this past Monday, we filed federal charges against Jamichael Craver for being a felon in possession of a firearm. Craver was arrested on Friday night during operations conducted by the Dayton Police Department and the Ohio State Highway Patrol as part of the Violent Crime Reduction Initiative between the City of Dayton and the State of Ohio. According to the federal complaint, Craver fled on foot from a vehicle that was being tracked by DPD officers and an aviation unit from the Ohio State Highway Patrol. Craver eventually was apprehended by DPD officers after a foot pursuit and allegedly found to be in possession of a 9mm handgun. At the time of this incident, Craver was a wanted fugitive with multiple warrants for his arrest for state charges including aggravated trafficking in drugs and having weapons under disability. And Craver previously had been convicted in state court of aggravated robbery and kidnapping. We were able to obtain the federal charges on Craver almost immediately due to our strong partnerships with our state, federal, and local law enforcement agencies. As I mentioned earlier, Craver was arrested as part of an operation between the Ohio State Highway Patrol and DPD as part of that violent crime reduction initiative from the state. And I want to thank Governor DeWine and Director of Public Safety Andy Wilson for bringing that initiative not only to Dayton but to other cities across Ohio. My office has now charged defendants in Cincinnati and Dayton as a result of that initiative, and we'll continue to support that initiative whenever we can. But I also want to highlight the task force model that is so useful in these types of cases. My prosecutors were able to obtain a complaint working with a task force officer for the FBI. He's a DPD officer as well. He's part of the Safe Streets Task Force. We have direct connections with these task force officers. Those task force officers are able to communicate with the local departments, and so we can move very quickly to obtain federal charges against these folks who warrant federal charges, frankly, and this defendant is one of those people. That's not the only case I want to discuss today here, though. In a second case filed just 1 week ago, my office in Dayton also charged an individual named Terrence Gay for, among other things, assaulting federal agents with a deadly weapon, attempted murder of federal agents, discharging a firearm during and in relation to a crime of violence, and being a felon in possession of a firearm. As alleged in the criminal complaint against Gay, Gay was a federal fugitive out of Missouri who had failed to surrender after being sentenced for drug trafficking in 2021. The Southern Ohio Fugitive Apprehension Strike Team, or SOFAST, led by the U.S. Marshals Service, tracked Gay to a home in Dayton on March 23rd. After strike team members announced their presence and attempted to convince Gay to exit the residence, Gay opened fire on the officers with one round striking an unmarked law enforcement vehicle where 3 officers were sitting. And thank goodness no one was actually injured as a result of that shooting. But with the assistance of DPD SWAT, Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, and FBI agents who were assigned to the SOFAST task force, the marshals ultimately secured Gay and recovered multiple weapons from the residence. This is yet another impressive example of the federal and local partnerships that we have here in Dayton. It's also an impressive example of the bravery of our law enforcement officers and the sacrifices that they make on a day-to-day basis to keep our community safe. We've also been working with the with the ATF quite a bit here with federal gun cases coming through our office. In February, a federal grand jury sitting in Dayton indicted Anton Hurston for possessing a firearm fitted with a high-capacity magazine during a traffic stop. And speaking of, downtown Dayton, the initiative that the chief talked about, that traffic stop occurred right in Dayton Central Business District. So people carrying guns in the Dayton downtown area, the Central Business District area, if you get caught with a gun and you're a felon in possession, we're going to look at you for federal charges. We've been working as well with our partners at ATF, DPD, and FBI throughout the last few months to charge 2 defendants who participated in public shootings or allegedly held members of the public victim at gunpoint. First, Dylan Heiner repeatedly discharged a handgun near the University of Dayton's campus during the early morning hours of November 1st, 2025. At the time of this shooting, Heiner was under indictment on state weapons charges, and he has since pled guilty in February to the indictment that we charged him with federally and is now pending sentencing. Second, an individual named Colby Smith was indicted in January of this year for kidnapping, carjacking, and brandishing a firearm during a crime of violence, as alleged in an earlier federal complaint filed against Mr. Smith. During the morning of December 9th, 2025, Smith used a handgun to rob 2 Dayton area residents of their vehicles and their personal belongings as they traveled to their jobs. Finally, we know that drug trafficking and gun violence go hand in hand, and cases involving 6 defendants were charged federally between December of 2025 and this last March, which include allegations involving trafficking of fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, and other drugs, and the possession of firearms in relation to that drug trafficking activity. First, Johnny Ray Perkins and Elisha Lobley were charged with allegedly selling drugs in the vicinity of the RTA bus hub in downtown Dayton again. During these sales, Perkins allegedly kept a firearm on his person. Finally, defendants Jaquan Sims, Mayan Vineyard, Raheem Goff, and Joshua Haggins were federally indicted for conspiring to distribute over 400 grams of fentanyl and possessing a firearm in furtherance of the drug trafficking. Law enforcement officials in relation to that investigation seized multiple firearms, including one machine gun. So all of these prosecutions demonstrate our continuing determination at all levels of government to combat the gun violence in Dayton, and in downtown Dayton in particular. I'm extremely proud of the work that my prosecutors have done on a day-to-day basis alongside our law enforcement partners in aid of this effort. But we're by no means done here. We're not here to declare victory. We're continuing to do these cases. We will continue to do them as long as I'm the U.S. Attorney. And I think, from my standpoint, I expect to see a steady stream of these cases to continue. And the bottom line is we want to send a message to anybody who wants to illegally carry or use a firearm and ammunition in Dayton or in any other city in our district for that matter, that if you do that, we're going to be looking at federal charges on you. So I thank you for your time, and I'd like to pass it over now to Special Agent in Charge, Cromartie.
Thank you, sir. Morning. Hello. I'm Jason Cromartie, Special Agent in Charge for FBI Cincinnati Field Office that covers Southern and Central Ohio. I want to thank U.S. Attorney Drace, the Dayton Police Department, and the ATF for the ongoing work to protect this city. The FBI is committed to working with our partners to reduce violent crime. Our Safe Streets Task Force includes officers from the Dayton Police Department who work alongside FBI agents to pursue federal charges and help to make this community a safer place to live and to work. We do this because the residents of Dayton deserve a safe and secure community. I might be biased, but as a former Dayton police officer, I believe the Gem City has a strong and great police force. When the U.S. Attorney's Office, the ATF, the FBI join together with the Dayton Police Department, it's a tremendous force multiplier, and it produces an even larger impact. Working together, this law enforcement partnership has made positive steps at reducing violent crime. It's been demonstrated by the cases you've heard about today. Our work will continue, but I also encourage the public to help out and join these efforts to keep our city safe. If you know people who have committed crimes, we need you to speak up. Contact the Dayton Police Department or Miami Valley Crime Stoppers at 222-STOP, or contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI, because you should be a part of helping keep the community and your neighborhood safe. We thank you for your assistance, and again, we thank these law enforcement partners up here for their continued work to reduce violent crime in this great city. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jorge Rosendo, ATF. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for being here today. My name is Jorge Rosendo, ATF Special Agent in Charge. ATF, Dayton Police, FBI, and other partners are working together to attack violent crime at its core. The cases announced today by the U.S. Attorney and cases presented in the previous months show the commitment that we have with the Dayton people. We're here to work with you and protect you guys. ATF works closely with Dayton PD and our partners. We use intelligence, partnerships to attack violent crime. This collaboration allows investigators to quickly identify suspects, interrupt criminal activities, and prevent more violence. The work being conducted here is critical in our ongoing fight against violence. And I'm proud to stand along with my partners today and continue with this mission. And together, we send a message, a clear message. Violence has no place here. Possessing firearms illegally is not acceptable. And working together, we will build a safer and stronger community. Thank you for your time. Back to the Chief.
Well, thank you all. U.S. Attorney's Office, ATF, FBI, U.S. Marshal's Office, really appreciate the work that we do together. I'd be remiss if I don't identify some other people that actually do the work on the ground level from the department perspective. So sitting right there, we have Lieutenant Jackie Mwali. Lieutenant Mwali is in charge of downtown, so a lot of the stuff that you see officers doing is really under her command. Then Major Brian Johns, who is commander of East Patrol, which downtown and East Patrol is part of. Without his help, and along with Jackie, none of the stuff that we do will be possible. And finally, Deputy Chief Henderson, who really runs the department day-to-day basis operationally. So all these guys work together. So sometimes we're the face of our organizations, but the work goes much deeper. There are a lot of unsung heroes that are doing the great work. So at this point, I'll open it for questions that you might have, because I know you're not going to have any for me, Mike, right?
I mean, talk about why there's maybe a focus on people that have already been ruled to be carrying illegally. In other words, do you feel like, or do statistics show that they're more likely to use a weapon when, that they're carrying already illegally? They have less concern?
Right. So I remember a few months ago when the state came up there, Director Wilson talked about a research that the state had done where it was people who have already committed crimes are so much more likely to commit more crimes. And that represents a very small minority of people. So the focus there is to really identify individuals that have repeatedly committed harm. So it's one thing to give people a shot, right? So maybe things happen in their life and maybe they go in the wrong direction, they do something, we catch them, and they learn from their mistake. But these are the individuals that the attorneys talked about, the FBI talked about, ATF talked about, we're talking about individuals that repeatedly have been given chances and have not learned a lesson. So that's, at some point, the consequences need to match what their actions are. So that's what the focus is on, those small number of people that really do commit the harm in our communities, and then give a reputation to the city that it's really hard to overcome. And that we're really trying to focus, it's called intelligence-led policing, right? Who are the people doing harm, who are repeatedly doing harm, and let's go after them and remove them from society because they have not learned a lesson.
What kind of research goes into finding some of these people, and has there been an increase in some of these fugitives or members of violent crime coming here to Dayton? Because you're capturing a lot more of them now, but what is bringing like a man from Missouri here?
I can't, I'm going to let somebody else speak with that because I don't know what brings them here. The focus is definitely looking at our data, looking at research to say who commits crime, and then really focusing on repeat offenders. So we have our databases, we look at the crimes that they committed and see if they qualify, and they're still involved in that crime, right? It's one thing to be qualified, but if you have no intelligence that you're still active, then you've done your time, and God bless you. But if we find from our street crews, through our special agents, that their names keep popping up as the people who are committing harm, that's when we go, okay, so they've done something in the back, they're still active, let's go see if we can identify these individuals, and if they do then still commit crime again, we can have our partnerships with the numerous people here to take them federally and have more stringent cases with them. I don't know if anybody else
I
wants to
can
talk
speak
about
to that real quick. You asked what he came to Dayton for from Missouri, to avoid apprehension. He knew that our teams, we collaborate with other law enforcement agencies. We have fugitive apprehension teams all across the country. So a lot of times when we apprehend them, you see that they're from another state. They come here thinking that, they're going to get free or we're going to stop looking for them. And there's never a time that we say, okay, he's gone, he left the area, we're just going to let him go and forget about it. We stay on him. This individual had committed crimes. One of our deputy marshals here in the Dayton area had the tenacity to stay after him over all those years and finally got a tip that he was located here. And we used all of our teammates, all the resources to, fortunately, get this done safely. As he said, he fired at us, but our teams, they take a lot of time, do the surveillance, and our ultimate goal is to apprehend them as safely as possible without a violent confrontation. Unfortunately, we don't always get to dictate that. But, when you see them going from one state to another, they're trying to avoid apprehension because they know that we're probably on to them in the area where they're currently located.
U.S. Attorney, I got one for you. As far as the people that are getting charged, like they're already repeat offenders, are federal sentencing guidelines strict on that? In other words, are you able to keep them off, if you get a conviction in federal court at that point on maybe a second or a third conviction, are you able to keep them off the street longer than, say, maybe a state court?
Yeah, so our main tool in a lot of these cases is the felon in possession of a firearm statute. The federal statute allows for imprisonment of up to 15 years, and then there's some recidivist enhancements where if you have enough prior, drug convictions or crime of violence convictions, there's a mandatory minimum of 15 years under the Armed Career Criminal Act. So we have stiffer penalties for that crime. The state analog is the weapons under disability. It's up to 3 years. So we have a higher maximum amount. We have, in certain cases, an ability to get a mandatory minimum. And then we have the federal sentencing guidelines where if you have a bad enough record, your guidelines go up. So we do think there's for some of these folks that are repeat offenders who are dangerous, who are trigger pullers, going federal is the way to go. We also think that in a lot of cases we can make some pretty good bond arguments to keep them off the street once they get arrested in federal court. Now we still have to go before judges and magistrates and convince a magistrate judge that, hey, this person's a danger to the community and they should be detained prior to being adjudicated guilty. But we think we have good arguments to make in the federal system in that regard, based on the Bail Reform Act and the factors that the judges are supposed to look at. So it's really about getting them detained once they're arrested and keeping them off the street, and also get them a stiffer sentence at the back end once they get convicted.
So this operation is not, you're not announcing any new task forces or teams, but you're just sharing intelligence even more than before to try and get the worst of the worst off the streets? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, we're making a concerted effort. As Special Agent in Charge Cromartie said, I mean, in Dayton for a long time they've had the Safe Streets Task Force. FBI's had those guys. Some of the folks that are still working as TFOs I worked with when I was an assistant, United States attorney. So those things have been in place for a long time. We're making sure that we're communicating. From my perspective and my office's perspective, it's, hey, we're paying attention to shootings that are going on. Okay, so the Marshall Task Force shooting, that's one that we're going to hear about because there's federal agents involved, but situations where maybe there's no federal agent involved, there's a shooting going on, someone gets picked up as part of the Violent Crime Reduction Initiative, my AUSAs in Dayton are paying attention. They're talking to the task force officers from DPD for the FBI so we can get those guys federal. We're identifying those people. So it's really more about focused, concerted effort, making sure that my office is dedicating as many resources as possible to fighting violent crime.
And should this be expediting that process for some of these violent offenders who are out, perhaps living in Dayton right now? Someone else just gets in an encounter with an officer, they apprehend them, you look at the caseload, you look at priors, and you say, oh, he was a felon in possession of a firearm, just bump it up to federal.
Absolutely. We're expediting. I mean, the Craver individual that I discussed earlier is a great example of how quickly we can move when we're talking to each other. We found out about that arrest on Friday night. We had a complaint on the guy on Monday morning. That's not super usual in the federal system. It only happens because we know who to talk to. We have these great partnerships. And again, I go back to the task force model. It's having a task force officer with the FBI, with the ATF, who is a local police department officer. Those people know who to talk to, who the arresting officer was, who had the interaction with the guy on the street. So we can quickly determine, hey, is this a good stop? Are there going to be suppression issues? And we can make charging decisions very quickly.
I do have one thing surrounding, you talked about relationships with like troopers, state troopers, in some capacity. So when we see aerial devices, helicopters and things of that sort off to try to make an arrest somewhere, people in the public will often post online and things, why are there helicopters and things like that flying around? So what should people know, because sometimes it could be a stolen vehicle or something along those lines, but what should people know if they see, hey, this helicopter been flying around my neighborhood for an hour, 2 hours now?
Yeah, the reason that we have we get assistance from our state partners is that what we don't want, we want to catch dangerous individuals, and we know what they do. They do everything they can to get away, and that can potentially cause harm, especially in an urban environment like ours. So we use air support to maybe not have the chase that otherwise we would have to have, which actually creates more issues. And when they believe they might have lost us, we know exactly where they're at, and we'll catch them. So we catch them after they think, well, nobody's chasing me, because we do have a very restrictive pursuit policy, and it's I believe for our agency it's the right pursuit policy because of the pure density that we have in Dayton that maybe you might not have in rural areas. So those the helicopter or any kind of aviation assets that we have is to make sure that we are not involved in a very dangerous situation and creating other dangerous situations for people who have no idea what's going on, right? Because a lot of these individuals, when they flee from us, they're not they're not, they're throwing caution to the wind. Even when we chase somebody, we still have to do everything with due regard for safety. So we have to come to a stop at a red light, right? The individual's running, we don't. With the aviation support, we don't have to chase somebody, and we just figure out where they're going, and we just get, maybe we parallel them and we'll get there. So that's a really great asset. So when we do have that, we don't have one of our own. We're very fortunate that Governor DeWine and State Patrol Superintendent and Director Wilson has been working with us and providing us that asset that really helps us. So we don't unnecessarily create chaos and harm to people who are just doing just going about their business. So I think that's where it's really, really useful. And other thing you had a question that another U.S. attorney answered. It is a concentrated effort. It's not nothing new, but part of that also is for us to tell to the public that if you are involved in these activities, stop. Stop committing harm to the very people that you're part of, right? Because that's what violent crime occurs, right? It occurs among people who know each other, usually, and it occurs in areas where they usually have some stake. So our messaging is whether it's a downtown, this is about downtown, but those efforts are in East and West Patrol. Our message is that if you're done your time and if you don't involve any crime from this point on, we don't care. You've done your time, but we're not okay if we get information that you're still at it, right? And that's when we're going to go and saying, no, that's not acceptable. You've given me shots, and then there's some. Each municipality or each level of government, state government, has different criteria for punishment. It just happens to be for if you're a felon and have a gun, the federal limits are a little bit better in our favor than maybe states are. So that's why the effort is coordinated. So we are talking to each other all the time. After each of those violence crime reduction initiative, we get together the next day and figure out what do we have and who do we need to contact. So it is definitely intentional on our part.